திருச்சிற்றம்பலம். புழியர்கோன் வெப்பொழித்த புகழியர்கோன் கடல் போற்றி, ஆழிமிசை கல் மிதப்பில் அணைந்த பிரான் அடி போற்றி, வாழி திரு நாவலூர் வன் தொண்டர் பதம் போற்றி, ஊழிமலி திருவாத ஊரர் திருத்தாள் போற்றி. திருச்சிற்றம்பலம். So we have been discussing 7.39 tiruttoṇḍattogai padhigam, and currently we are discussing the 5th verse and stories in the 5th verse, and we have been discussing thirugnAna sambandar's story. And last time when we concluded, we had seen thirugnAna sambandar and thirunavukarasar worshipping in Vedaranyam, where they opened the temple door and they closed the temple door with their padhigams, and then thirunavukarasar was taken to Thiruvaimur by Shiva, and then Sambandar followed him, and then they both came back to Vedaranyam from Thiruvaimur. So that's where we had said, we had stopped, that they both were staying at Vedaranyam. And when they were staying in Vedaranyam at that time, a couple of messengers come from Madurai to Vedaranyam and then meet thirugnAna sambandar. And they tell him what's going on in Madurai. So at that time, the Madurai kingdom, the Pandya kingdom, had become sort of a Jain kingdom, in the sense that the Jains were influenced there, and the king was also a Jain, and so the Shiva worship had declined drastically in Pandya kingdom. And the Pandya king, he was known as Hunchback Pandya. In Tamil, he was known as Koon Pandyan. Koon means a curve or a bend, and that means that the hunchback. So the Pandya king had a hunchback, but he was the king. And as he was a king, and he had probably made some deal, or maybe he had a war with this Chola kingdom, and as a peace deal or whatever, he had married the Chola princess. So his wife was Mangayar Karasi, and she was the daughter of Chola king. And he had a minister, chief minister. His name was kOLaRu. And both the Mangayar Karasi and kOLaRu, both of them were ardent Shiva devotees. So the king was a Jain, and so Yatha Raja Tata Praja, so as the king, so goes the country. So the Madurai was full of Jains, and the Pandya kingdom was also full of Jains. So the temples were not taken care of, and when these things happen, some temples were converted into Jain monasteries or Jain temples, and all those things happen. So the queen was feeling sad. Our country is going this way. And that time, obviously they had heard about this thirugnAna sambandar and his greatness and all that. And so the queen thought, maybe if thirugnAna sambandar comes to Madurai, maybe he can show the right path to the king. So she discusses this with the chief minister, kOLaRu, and they both agree, yeah, it's a good idea. So they selected some very trustworthy messengers and told them that, take this message, go to Chola kingdom, go find out where thirugnAna sambandar is currently at, go there and deliver our message to him. And that message is, Madurai is being overrun by the Jains, and even the king is Jain, and it will be good if he can come to Madurai and help us. So the messengers, I don't know how many of them were there. Let's say there were like 4 or 5, right? Messengers, there won't be too many. So they went to Chola kingdom. They went around and they inquired and where Sambandar was at that point in time. And then they come to Vedaranyam. And then they come meet thirugnāna sambandar and deliver him this message, the background that is happening in Madurai. So thirugnāna sambandar, thinks that he should go to Madurai. So he goes into the Vedaranyam temple and prays to Shiva and seek his guidance. And with that, he decides to go to Madurai. So, as he was talking with Tirunavukkarasar, he tells Tirunavukkarasar that he had met with the messengers from Madurai, and this is the situation in Madurai, and that he plans to go to Madurai. And as soon as he said this, Tirunavukkarasar was a bit taken aback, because Tirunavukkarasar, he had been a Jain for many decades, and he had personally suffered at the hands of Jains. He was persecuted after he came back to Saivam. So he thought about those things and tells thirugnāna sambandar, "O son, the Jains are very terrible guys. I'm afraid that they may cause you harm if you go to Madurai. And also, the times are not good. Looking at the planetary positions and all that, right? This is not a good time for you to go to Madurai." So he tries to dissuade thirugnāna sambandar from going to Madurai. But thirugnāna sambandar, because his inner guidance from Shiva says that he should go to Madurai, so he tells Tirunavukkarasar, Shiva and Parvati are dwelling in my heart, and because they are dwelling in my heart, no harm will come to me. Don't worry. All the things that are usually considered bad will always do good things to me, to devotees. Don't worry, I will go to Madurai. And at that time, he sings a padhigam. Starts with the phrase Veyyuru Tholi Pangan. And this is popularly known as kOLaRu padhigam. This padhigam is 2.85, and in this padhigam, Sambandar mentions in every song that Shiva and Parvati are dwelling in my heart. Because of that, no bad things will happen to devotees. So he lists various things. So it's a very powerful padhigam, and it's a very popular padhigam. So many devotees do parayanam of this padhigam every day. So, and then after he sang the padhigam and after he explained his thinking, Tirunavukkarasar agrees. He says that I will also come with you to Madurai, because Madurai Jains are bad. I agree with what you are saying, but still my feeling says that I should come with you. Then thirugnāna sambandar tells Tirunavukkarasar, Appare, you stay in Chola kingdom, I will go to Madurai. And because of that, where Shiva says that, thirugnāna sambandar says that Tirunavukkarasar does not disagree. So thirugnāna sambandar starts with his entourage on his palanquin and starts on his trip to Madurai. So as he goes along, from Vedaranyam to Madurai, it's probably at least a couple of 100 kilometers. Okay, so he stops by various temples on the way, padhigams and all that, and finally he gets near Madurai. And as he was about to enter the Madurai town, kOLaRu, the minister, comes to meet him and welcome him to Madurai. Because kOLaRu, because he was the minister, he had his messengers and he had his scouts, so they know where is thirugnāna sambandar, where when is he likely to come to Madurai and all that, right? So they are tracking him. So as soon as he was about to enter, kOLaRu comes on his horses or whatever, and then meets thirugnāna sambandar and his party and welcomes them to Madurai. And then thirugnāna sambandar asks, where is the Alavai temple? The temple in Madurai is known as Alavai. I think we have said that in other padhigam discussions, that in many places the town will have a name and the temple will have a name. As I was mentioning, Chidambaram, the town was known as Tillai and the temple is known as Chitrambalam. Similarly, in Madras, Mylapur, the town is called Mylapur and the temple is called Kapalishwaram. Like that, in Madurai, the temple is known as Alavai. So he asks, where is the Alavai temple? And immediately kOLaRu points to the gopuram that was seen at some distance and says, that is Alavai temple. So Sambandar starts walking towards the temple, and then he sings one very wonderful padhigam, Mangair Karasi. That's how the starting phrase. Mangair Karasi. And in that, this is 3.120 padhigam. In the 11 songs, he sings the glory of greatness of Mangair Karasi, the queen, and kOLaRu, the minister, their devotional level and their qualities and their greatness. He praises them and says, O Shiva, who is worshipped by these people. That's how he sings the whole padhigam. So thirugnāna sambandar, occasionally, when he is meeting some great devotees, in his padhigam of that town, he will include the devotee's name. He will document that. So like that, in this padhigam 3.120, in one song, like on the first, second, third, fifth, seventh, and ninth song, he praises Mangair Karasi's greatness. In the even number songs, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10, he praises the greatness of kOLaRu, the minister. And in the final 11th song, he mentions both of them. So that's a special padhigam. And then he goes to Madurai temple, worships Shiva and Parvati there. As you know, many of you have been to Madurai temple. It is the Ambal is known as Meenakshi, and Swami is known as Sundareswar in Sanskritam. In Tamil, Ambal is known as Angayar Kanni, and Swami is known as Sokkanathan. And after he worshipped, and then as he was coming out of the temple, the queen was waiting, and she falls at his feet, and then Sambandar blesses her and says that don't worry, everything will be taken care, don't worry. And then they had arranged a guest house for Sambandar and his entourage, so they go to the guest house and they are staying there. And the giants of Madurai, by this time they have come to know, right? They have learned that this great Shaiva saint from Chola kingdom, Sambandar and his entourage have come to Madurai, and they may try to change the king from being a giant to becoming a Shiva devotee. So they want to somehow get rid of this Sambandar. So they go to the king and says, this is what is there. There's some Shaiva guy has come from Chola kingdom. Let's get rid of him. And the king says, what are we going to do? They say, we know our mantras, and we can do some mantra japam and all that. With our mantram, we will drive him away. The king says, okay. King agrees. And the giants are busy chanting their mantras, trying to scare away thirugnāna sambandar. But none of their mantras worked. So they are the giant leaders, they decide that let's physically set fire to the guest house where they are staying. That way, either they will be killed or they will be made to fear their life and run away from Madurai. So at night, they send some of the giants go to the guest house where Sambandar and his team are staying, and then they set fire to that place. And fortunately, some of the people of Sambandar's entourage, they discover that the fire has been set early enough, and they alert everybody else. They come run outside and they escape. But then Sambandar asks them what happened, and they tell them that we saw some giants. And Sambandar, because he has got Jnana Drishti, he realizes that giants had set fire to this guest house, and he feels that the ultimate responsibility for such lawlessness rests with the king. So he says, he sings a padhigam from that place itself, from wherever he was standing out this guest house, burnt down guest house. He stands there and sings a padhigam. Sayyane thirugnAna maybe ayyane. It is padhigam 3.51. He sings that padhigam, and in that padhigam, he requests Shiva to gently send this fire to the king. So he says the king is responsible for this lawlessness. The fire that has been set here, may this fire go gently back to the king. So as soon as he sang that padhigam, the Pandya king comes down with very high fever. And then next day the king's royal doctors come, look at him, and then they try to give him whatever medications they have in those days to cure the fever. And none of their well-known remedies work. And the giants also try, their mantras and say, let's since the remedies, herbs and other remedies didn't work, let's try our mantras and cure the king. They try their mantras and japams and all that, but the fever does not go away. It is very high. If somebody is going like 105, 106, that can be a very high fever. Then you know how it is. And he is, lying. He is not able to move. He is so weak. And then the queen and the minister approach the king and says, "No, king, maybe this is the they tell him that the giants had set fire to this guest house, and maybe that sin is what is causing this fever for you. Maybe if thirugnAna Sambandar comes and meets you, maybe he can get rid of your fever." The king says, yeah, if there is a way for him to come here, let us try. Because the Sambandar may refuse to come into to come and cure the king, right? Because they had set fire to his guest house. So the queen and the minister go to Sambandar and tell him, Swami, the king is having very high fever, and maybe if he can come and bless him, his fever will go away. And Sambandar says, okay, let me go seek guidance from Shiva before I come to the palace. Don't worry. So then he goes to the Madurai temple and sings some padhigams. He sings two padhigams. He sings a padhigam. Says, "O Shiva, what is your wish? Should I go and enter into debate with the giants? What's your wish?" So the 3.108 padhigam is dealing with that. Veda velvi nindanai seidudal adamilli amanodu therarai vadil vendralikka thiru ullame பாதி மாதுடனாய பரமனே ஞாலம் நின் புகழே மிக வேண்டும் தென் ஆலவாயில் உரையும் மாதியே. Just as that, was Shiva of Madurai temple. What is your wish? Should I go to debate the Jains who are disrespectful of the Vaidika Dharma, those who criticize all the yajnas that people do? Should I go and debate and defeat those Jains? What is your wish? I want to ensure that the world hears your glory. Let me know. So he sings the padhigam, and then he sings one more padhigam. He sings 2 padhigams, and then he feels in his heart that Shiva has given him the go ahead to go to debate. So then he gets onto his palanquin and goes to the palace. And then he goes into the palace, and then the king is, king is lying on a cot, unable to move because he's high fever, and a lot of Jains were standing around that area. So Sambandar enters, and you can imagine Sambandar was probably, let's say, 9 or 10 years old at the time. And they were, let's say, in the room, the king was there, the queen was there, minister was there, and probably there were like 30, 40, 50 Jains hanging around, and the Sambandar, as a young kid, like a 9 or 10-year-old kid, goes in. And as soon as he saw Sambandar coming in, the king, points, gestures, right? Either by looking at it or by waving his hand or whatever. He points to a seat on the right-hand side near his head. So Sambandar goes and sits there. And then the king asks him, sir, where are you from? And then he sings one padhigam in which, I have mentioned, right, earlier that Sirgari has 12 names based on various Salapurana stories. So he sings a padhigam listing all the 12 names of this Sirgari in each song. It is padhigam 2.70. He sings that padhigam. So he takes the 12 names, put them in different order in each song, and sings that saying, I am from Sirgari. And as soon as the Jains heard this, this young saint singing so many songs, they got a little bit of their fear increased, and then they started surrounding Sambandar, and everyone started asking him to come to debate their tattvams, right? Their philosophy, and why Jainism is a greater religion, why Saivam is not a good religion, and all that. So they wanted to debate him. So everybody started calling out and asking him to come to a debate. You can imagine, right? If there are 20 people, each one shouting and asking and saying something, it will be like a cacophony. And then the queen, the Mangayar Karasi, the queen, who had invited Sambandar from Chola kingdom to Pandya kingdom, she started feeling very afraid. Right? She was very much afraid because this young kid, surrounded by all these big brute guys, she was afraid of Sambandar's physical safety. So Sambandar looked at her and he immediately realized that she was fearing for his life. So then he sings one wonderful padhigam. It is padhigam 3.39. It says, Maninner veli Madurai Vazhadikku Maaperum Devi Kel. I'll skip the rest of the song, but he says, I am not, don't worry, nothing will happen to me. I am not inferior to all these stupid Jains. Shiva is in my heart. I am protected, don't worry. He sings that padhigam in front of all those Jains. And then, but the Jains are still calling him to come to debate. Then the queen tells the king, "Oh king, you are having very high fever. and these guys are calling him to come and debate their tattvams. So I think it will be best if they first cure you of your fever before they start any debate. The king hears her logic and says, tells the giants and the sambandar, I have this fever, nobody is able to cure it, so whichever side cures my fever, I will know which side has the truth. So they agree, and then giants put a very strange condition. They say that we will cure one half of your body that is on our side. Let some other cure half of your body that is on his side. That way we will know. Because if one goes first and cures the whole body, then you don't know, others don't get a chance, right? So they give this kind of a proposal. And at that, Sambandar agrees. So Sambandar is on the right hand side of the king. Giants are on the left hand side of the king. So the giants do their holy mantras, and then they sprinkle holy water on the king, and then they fan his body with the peacock feathers that they carry, and the fever did not come down. Instead, it was even increasing. So then, after whatever time, right, maybe for half an hour or 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever is the period, then king turns his head to some other and looks at him, which means that hey, now why don't you try? So some other takes the holy ash that he has got from the temple, and then sings one padhigam, mandiramavadu neeru. Neeru in Tamil means ash, which also stands for holy ash, which is the vibhuti, bhasma. Then he sings that padhigam, and he probably sang 5 or 6 songs of that padhigam, and as he was singing those songs, he took the holy ash and rubbed on the king's right hand side of the body. And I would say that he sang about half of the padhigam. By the time he did this, the right hand side returned back to normal, right? Instead of 105, it became whatever is the normal temperature, 98.4 or whatever, right? And then the king feels this strangest feeling, right? He can feel that on the right hand side of his body it is cool, and on the left hand side of his body it is burning. And the king says, no, what is this? What a strange thing. In one body I am feeling fever on one side and I am normal on the other side. How can this be? And then he looks at Sambandar and says, please cure the other side too. So then Sambandar sings the remaining songs of the padhigam, applies holy ash on the left hand side, and with that, king's fever is gone. King is immediately back to normal. So he was very happy, and he says that then Sambandar looks at the giants and says, okay, let's now that the king is cured of his fever, we can debate your philosophy. When Sambandar said that, the giants, for whatever reason, feel that it may be difficult to defeat him in tarkam, logical debate. So let us do our magical things. They had so much belief in their magical powers and their mantras. They said that we will show it by physical means. Let us not worry about this abstract logical debate, but let us prove which side is the side of truth by physical tests. So they say, the giants propose the next challenge. They say, let us put our holy books. You can put your holy books. We will put both our holy books in the fire, and whichever side's holy books remain untouched at the end of that will be the true religion. So they agree. So then Sambandar agrees. So the king orders a fire pit to be set up outside They created a pit, and then they put a lot of logs, and they create a big fire. And then sambandar calls for his palm manuscripts. Everywhere temple sambandar goes, he will sing a padhigam or sing several padhigams. and his entourage, right? There were people in his group who will be writing down the padhigams, and they will be carrying those padhigam palm leaf bundles with them. So he asks them to bring one of those bundles, and then he randomly picks one palm leaf from that bundle, and that palm leaf is from a padhigam that he sang when he had been to kOLaRu temple, that is near Karaikal. And that padhigam is called Bhogamartha Poonmulayal. That is a song that comes in the padhigam and the palm leaf manuscript. Then he sings a new padhigam, tillai-vāḻ. This is padhigam 3.87. He sings that padhigam, and in the padhigam he says, I am going to put this palm leaf manuscript, which Shiva's name and praise, and when I put this in fire, it will remain fresh. This is true. And then he sings the padhigam, and then takes his manuscript and puts it in the burning fire. And then, whatever is the appointed time, right? Maybe like half an hour or 20 minutes or whatever is the appointed, agreed upon time. He waits for that amount of time, and then he picks up that manuscript back from the fire and shows it to everybody that it is fresh, unburnt, untouched. Everybody is, obviously you can imagine, right? A palm leaf manuscript lying in burning fire for, let's say, 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and then still remaining untouched, fresh. And he puts it back in the bundle and gives it to his associates. Now it is a turn of Jains. So the Jains take their holy books and write the holy mantras on palm leaf manuscripts, and then they put their manuscript on the fire, and in no time that manuscript gets burnt and becomes ashes. And then they don't know what to do now. So the Jains again say, we have let's have one more test. Because they say, even though we didn't win this test, but ours is still true religion, equally true religion at least. They wanted to say it's a superior religion, but now having lost a couple of times, now they say, at least we have truth in our religion, and let's have one more test. And Sambandar was, before Sambandar could say anything, the minister intervenes. He says, oh Jains, you wanted one test, you lost the test. You wanted a second test, you have lost the test. And he wanted one more test. And where is the end? If you lose the third test, you will again ask for a fourth test. Where do we stop this? Or what are you going to do if you lose this test? And the Jains, when you are angry, you don't know what you are saying. So the Jains, in their frustration and in anger, they say that if we lose this test, the king can give us punishment by putting us on stake. So this is a punishment. kOLaRu is called the impaling on the stake. That is a punishment in those days. And they agree. So what is the test? They say, we will put our manuscripts on the Vaigai floods. Some other can put his thing, and whichever manuscript remains in place and not, that is the winning side. The Vaigai river is near Madurai. Today you don't see much water in it, but in those days, a lot of water must have been flowing in the Vaigai river. And so it was, they all go to the riverside, and first Jains go first, So the Jains take their palm leaf manuscript, write their mantram, Asti Nasti. Asti Nasti is a Jain mantram, which that is part of their philosophy, which means that Asti it exists, Nasti doesn't exist. That is their philosophy on God, Asti Nasti, and so they write Asti Nasti, and they put their they chant their prayers, and then they put the manuscript on the Vaigai river. Immediately, the manuscript is carried away by the Vaigai river downstream towards this. So the Jains run after that, but the Vaigai is faster than they can run. So shortly thereafter, the palm leaf manuscript goes out of sight towards the sea. So the Jains come back, and then they could have said that they have lost, but even then they still have a hope against hope, right? They say, let Sambandar also put his manuscript. Let's see what happens. Because if his manuscript also gets washed away, then we can say it's a draw, right? So they say, and Sambandar, at that point in time, sings a new padhigam. This is padhigam 3.54. He says, Vāḻga andaṇar vānavar āninam Vilga Tanpunal Vendanam Onguga Alga Thiyadellam Aran Navame Sulgat Vayagamum Sverdirgame. This is the first song. In that padhigam there are 12 songs, and some other there's a very unique padhigam in some other thevaram. In all padhigams he will be praising Shiva and mentioning philosophical principles everywhere. But in this padhigam is full of explanation of the summary of the Saiva Siddhantam philosophy. So in every song he is giving the philosophical aspects of Shaivam and saying, this will be the truth. And he puts the palm leaf manuscript in the river with his own hands. And the deal was that, the manuscript should remain in place and not get washed away. But Sambandar's padhigam, instead of just remaining in place, it swims upstream against the river. And the kOLaRu, the minister, he gets on his horse and starts galloping along the banks, following the palm leaf manuscript. And then it doesn't stop. The manuscript keeps swimming upstream. And after some time, Sambandar sings another padhigam. And as soon as he sang that padhigam, the palm leaf manuscript stops on the stream, doesn't go forward, doesn't come downstream, it stays at the same place. And then kOLaRu goes and picks up that manuscript at that place and then returns back. The place where it stopped is known as thiruvedagam. Yedu means palm leaf manuscript, agam is place. So the place where the palm leaf Sambandar's manuscript stopped, that is known as Yedagam. There is a temple. It's about 15-20 kilometers from about 15 kilometers from Madurai, upstream. And kOLaRu comes back and delivers the manuscript to the king. And obviously the Jains have lost in their final debate. So the tradition is that the king impaled the Jain leaders. And maybe some became Shaivas, maybe some left the place, maybe some, because of the honor that they had, they impaled themselves. But the bottom line is that since they tried to kill Sambandar and his entourage by setting fire to the place where they were staying, we can look at that as a punishment for their misdeed. So with that, the king becomes a Shiva devotee. And also, in that song, Sambandar says, Vāḻga andaṇar vānavar āninam Vilga Tanpunal Vendanum Onguga. There's a key phrase, Vendanum Onguga. Vendan means king, Onguga means may he be straight, upstanding, maybe be upright, or may he flourish. So Ongudal means to stand erect, to go up, to be flourishing. Many meanings are there. So because of that, because Sambandar said, may the king stand straight, the king's hunchback is cured as well at that point. He becomes a normal bodied king. So before this point, he was known as Kun Pandian, the Madurai Pandya king with a hunchback. After this point, he is known as Nindrasir Nedumaran. Again, that means that Nindrasir means one who's the has many meanings, but Sir means fame, and Nindra means standing. So the Nedumaran with standing fame. And then the king becomes a Shiva devotee. Once the king becomes a Shiva, and then another kingdom becomes the prajas, the citizens of that country, right? The subjects of his kingdom. They all start following what the king is following. So they all come back to Shaivam, and that's how Sambandar re-established Shaivam in Pandya kingdom. And he stayed in Madurai for quite a while. And with the king, he toured around the salams in Pandya kingdom, salams like Rameswaram, salams like Tirunelveli. He went to various salams in southern India, in the southern tip of India, and sang padhigams. And he was staying there for some time. And when he was staying there, his father, right? Remember Sambandar's father from Sirgari. Sirgari is from Madurai. Sirgari is about something like 300 kilometers away, or 350 kilometers away. So Sambandar's father, Shivapada Hridayar, he was worried. His son had gone to Madurai and it has been a long time, so he wanted to come and meet his son. So he comes to Madurai, meets his son, and then Sambandar asked him, how are my divine parents? The Shiva and Parvati, the parents who gave him milk when he was 3 years old. He sings a very wonderful padhigam. Mannil Nallavannam Vaalalam. That is padhigam 3.24. I think so. Yeah. And then, 3.24. Yeah. And then, he returns. Father comes back to Sirgari, and then Sambandar starts on his return to Chola kingdom. So at this point, I would stop and ask you for any comments, questions that you have, if you have any. And then after that, we can listen to one padhigam that Sambandar, there are many padhigams that Sambandar sang in Madurai. We will listen to one of those padhigams, 2.66. So if you are on mute, you can unmute and talk if you want.
Good.
Okay. If there are no questions, then I would play the padhigam. And I did send the link to the verses in the email as well as on WhatsApp. So you have that. You can follow along as you hear the padhigam.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yes.
So as you may have noticed in this padhigam, up to song number 6, if you look at the last line, so the first 6 songs end with the word Thiru Alavayan Thirunire. And 7 onwards, they end as Alavayan Thirunire. There is no Thiru in that. So that difference is what I think, this is my surmise, that Sambandar would have sang the first 6 songs as he was curing the right hand side, and then afterwards, when he was curing the left hand side, he would have sang the song 7 onwards. That's my theory. Okay, with that, we can conclude today's session. If you have any comments or questions, we can talk. Otherwise, let me know. Okay.
Yeah.
Tiruchitrambalam.
Thank you.